Anneliese Michel was born in the Bavarian community of Liebelfing, a community of just over 3,000 people. Her father, Joseph Michel, grew up in a religious family. His mother had 3 sisters who were nuns, and she wanted her son to follow in the family tradition and become a priest. Joseph chose to become a carpenter. He later served in the Reich Labor Service and then went to the Western Front with the Wehrmacht. He was a prisoner of war in the United States, returned to his homeland in 1945, and soon began working as a carpenter again. Anneliese's mother, Anna, graduated from a girls' high school and a vocational school. She worked in her father's office, where she met Joseph. They married in 1950. By then, Anna already had a daughter, Marta, born in 1948. She died in 1956 of kidney cancer and was buried outside the family plot in the cemetery. Anneliese later considered the birth of an illegitimate child to be her mother's sin and constantly repented of it. Anne herself was so ashamed of her illegitimate daughter that at her wedding to Joseph she covered her face with a black veil. Anneliese was brought up in a strict and devout Catholic environment. Her parents were reportedly deeply religious, rejected the reforms of the Second Vatican Council, and sympathized with extremist, even sectarian, Catholic groups. Michel attended Mass twice a week, sang in the church choir and, as the Washington Post noted, while other kids her age were rebelling against authority and experimenting with sex, she was trying to atone for the sins of drug addicts and prodigal priests by sleeping on the bare floor in the dead of winter. Anneliese's childhood was happy, although she grew up as a weak and sickly child. Anneliese loved to play in her father's sawmill, took piano and accordion lessons, was a good student, and dreamed of becoming an elementary school teacher. In addition to Martha, she had 3 more sisters: Gertrude, born 1954, Barbara, born 1956, and Roswitha, born 1957. In 1959, Anneliese went to primary school in Klingenberg, and in the 6th grade she transferred to the Karl Theodor Dahlberg Gymnasium in Aschaffenburg. Disease and treatment attempts. In 1968, Anneliese bit her tongue due to a spasm. A year later, she began to have strange night attacks. Due to dysarthria, Anneliese could not move, felt heaviness in her chest, sometimes lost the ability to speak, and could not call anyone close to her. In 1969, the girl woke up with difficulty breathing. In 1969, paralysis of the body. The girl woke up Dr. Gerhard breathing and advised the parents to go to the hospital. An electroencephalogram was performed, which did not reveal any changes in Michel's brain. However, she was diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy. In early February 1970, the girl was hospitalized with a diagnosis of tuberculosis. In June 1970, Michel suffered a 3rd seizure in the hospital where she was staying at the time. She was given anticonvulsants, including phenytoin, which did not bring the desired result. At that time, she began to claim that sometimes the face of the devil appeared before her. That same month, she was prescribed Aalept, a drug similar to chlorpromazine used to treat schizophrenia and other mental disorders. Despite this, she remained depressed. In 1973, while praying, she began hallucinating. She heard voices telling her she was damned and that she would burn in hell. Michel's treatment in a psychiatric hospital did not help, and she became increasingly doubtful of the effectiveness of the drugs. A devout Catholic, she believed she was the victim of possession. She later made a pilgrimage to San Giorgio Piacentino with family friend Thea Hein. There, Hein came to the conclusion that Michel was possessed, as she could not touch the crucifix and refused to drink water from the Holy Spring of Lourdes. Together with her family, Michelle approached several priests asking for an exorcism. They all refused and recommended that she continue her treatment. As Michelle was told, an exorcism requires permission from a bishop and absolute certainty of the patient's possession. In the period between attacks, Michelle showed no signs of mental disorder and led a normal life. In 1973, she graduated from the University of Würzburg. Fellow students later described her as withdrawn and intensely religious. In November 1975, she successfully passed the examinations to obtain the Missio Canonica, a special permit to carry out educational functions on behalf of the church. Michelle's condition worsened. She tore off her clothes, ate spiders and coal, bit off the head of a dead bird, licked her own urine off the floor. During her attacks, she spoke in different languages and called herself Beelzebub, Cain, Judas, Nero, Adolf Hitler, and other names. According to those around Michelle, sometimes the demons even argued with each other, and it seemed that she spoke in two different voices. In November 1973, she was prescribed carbamazepine. There are opinions that the treatment was not thought out and consistent enough. In particular, the doses were too small to cure such a serious disease. Michelle's exact diagnosis was never established. B. Dunning in his article suggests that she could have suffered from dissociative identity disorder, aggravated by schizophrenia, and that the attacks were caused by chronic stress. Although the psychiatry of that time could not cure the patient, it controlled her course to some extent. Michelle died after refusing treatment. Catholic priest and paranormal investigator John Duffy published a book about Michelle in 2011. He wrote that based on the available evidence, it was safe to say that Anneliese was not possessed. Jesuit priest and psychiatrist Ulrich Niemann said of the incident, "As a doctor, I say that there is no such thing as possession. In my opinion, these patients are mentally ill. I pray for them, but that alone is not enough. They must be treated as a psychiatrist. But at the same time, when a patient comes from Eastern Europe and believes that he is possessed by the devil, it would be a mistake to ignore his belief system." It has also been suggested that it may be because of the film The Exorcist, which came out in 1973, precisely at the time when Michelle's condition began to rapidly deteriorate. She may have become aware of the symptoms of possession and subconsciously tuned in to their manifestation. Exorcism I smirked. The first priest to respond to Michelle's requests was Ernst Alt. He said the girl did not look like someone suffering from epilepsy and believed that she was truly possessed. Michelle hoped for his help. In a letter to him in 1975, she wrote, "I am nobody. Everything is in vain. What should I do? I must get better. Pray for me." In September 1975, Bishop Joseph Stangl, after consulting with the Jesuit Adolf Rodwig, gave permission to Alt and another priest, Arnold or Wilhelm Renz, to perform the exorcism on the basis of paragraph 1 of Canon 1172 of the 1917 Code of Canon Law, but ordered that the rite be kept secret. The first rite was performed on September 24th. After this, Michelle stopped taking medication and completely trusted the exorcism. There were 67 rites performed over 10 months. They were carried out once or twice a week and lasted up to 4 hours. 42 rituals were filmed and later played in court in the case of Michelle's death. On the morning of July 1st, 1976, Michelle was found dead in her bed. When Altu was informed of this, he told her parents, Annelise's soul, cleansed of the satanic power, has rushed to the throne of the Most High. As the autopsy showed, Michelle's death was not directly caused by the exorcism. At some point, she decided that her death was inevitable and voluntarily refused food and drink. Michelle believed that her death would be an atonement for the sins of the younger generation and the clergy who were falling away from the canons. She hoped that people, having learned of her fate, would believe in God. At the time of her death, Michelle weighed only 68 or 70 pounds, about 30 kilograms, and was 166 centimeters tall, suffered from pneumonia. Her knee joints were torn from constant kneeling, and her entire body was covered in bruises and open wounds. In the last months of her life, Michelle couldn't even move without help and had to be tied to her bed to prevent her from hurting herself. According to Judge Eimar Bollender, who presided over Michelle's case, her death could have been prevented with treatment even 10 days before it happened. Court. The circumstances of Michelle's death were so unusual that it took investigators 2 years of investigation before the case was brought to trial. As prosecutor Carl Stenger later admitted, when he was informed about the exorcism case, he initially thought it was a prank by colleagues. The trial began on March 30th, 1978, and was widely covered in the press. Alt, Renz, and Michelle's parents were charged with criminal omission resulting in death by negligence. The parents were represented by Eric Schmidt-Leichner, while the priests were defended by lawyers hired by the church. The prosecution was demanding a fine or other appropriate punishment only for the priests, while the parents, in their opinion, should only be found guilty. This was explained by the fact that Michelle's parents had already suffered the punishment of losing their daughter, and before the exorcism they had been trying to help Annelise with traditional treatment for several years. Doctors testifying at the trial said Michelle was not possessed but suffered from psychiatric problems, exacerbated by epilepsy and religious hysteria. The defense cited the German Constitution, which guarantees citizens freedom of religion. Renz said he was sure the girl was possessed. Alt said he had no idea Michelle was in such a serious condition, and if he had, he would have immediately sought help. According to some reports, Alt turned to Dr. Richard Roth, who told Michelle, "There is no cure for the devil, Annelise." All the accused were found guilty, and the sentence handed down was even harsher than what the prosecution had demanded. They were given suspended sentences of 6 months in prison with a probationary period of 3 years. Memory. Michelle's death caused a huge stir in Germany and raised questions about the limits of religious freedom. Many Germans were dismayed that such an incident could happen in a modern European country. Journalist Franz Bartel, who covered the incident in the press, told the Washington Post 3 decades later that he was still struck by Michelle's death and the superstitious attitudes of those around her. The Washington Post noted in a 2005 article that exorcism is now more widespread than is commonly believed. According to Professor Clemens Richter, there are up to 70 practicing exorcists in France. A Polish Congress in 2005 was reportedly attended by 350 exorcists. Germany is an exception. There are only 2 or 3 exorcists active there, and they are forced to carry out their work in secret, albeit with the consent of the bishops. As the well-known skeptic Brian Dunning writes in his article, there are currently many known cases of deaths after the expulsion of demons. Michelle is revered by a small group of Catholics as an unofficial saint, and her grave is a place of pilgrimage. After the trial, Michelle's parents asked the authorities to allow their daughter to be exhumed. The official reason given was that she had been hastily buried in a cheap coffin. As it later emerged, a Carmelite nun from southern Bavaria told the Mickels that she had had a vision of Anneliese's incorruptible remains. According to official reports, this information was not confirmed. All later claimed that they were not allowed to personally attend the exhumation. Afterwards, Michelle's remains were reburied in an oak coffin with tin trim. Also near the cemetery, Anneliese's father built a small chapel in memory of his daughter. The girl's parents went there to pray throughout their lives. Joseph Michel died in 1999. Michelle's mother said in an interview in 2005 that she did not regret the exorcism and to this day believes that her daughter was possessed and died atoning for the sins of others. In Klingenberg, they try not to talk about Michelle, considering her death a black and shameful page in the history of the city. After Michelle's death, a group of German theologians formed a commission to change the rite of exorcism, and in 1984 they submitted proposals to the Vatican. It was suggested to remove those passages where the exorcist addresses the devil directly. As the members of the commission argued, such a form of address could further convince a mentally ill person of his own possession. It took 15 years to reach a decision. The updated description of the rite featured significant changes, but the most radical of the proposed changes were not adopted. In 2013, the house where the rituals were held burned down, reviving interest in Michelle's case and fueling new speculation about its paranormal nature.